What is up, Wizards fans? Welcome into another Believe in Wizards podcast. Sorry, it's been a while. Jihadi and I are both been traveling. We did get to link up while he was in here for in DC to watch his kids play at Gonzaga, which was cool. I don't know if you guys saw that picture on Twitter, but I've never felt smaller in my life standing next to that guy. So larger than life presence on the podcast here and in real life. So that was cool. We'll get back and sync here together in the start of the new year. Honestly, there's just not really been a lot to say about the Wizards. Those of you who are still watching the pod and watching the team are probably well aware of that. There's only so much you can kind of say about this group right now, because most of these games are largely playing out kind of the same way, but that's okay. Hey, we've got a job to do here as well. We'll get back into it, and just want to talk a little bit more about just kind of what we could see being useful for each of these Wizards in the new year here. So we're going to do sort of a yearly tradition here on the Believe in Wizards podcast. What would Santa give to each of these Wizards players? So stay tuned for that. We'll get to that here in a minute. But first, we're brought to you by Stateside Vodka and their Surfside hard iced teas, hard lemonades. That's a great gift for friends and family this holiday season. So keep that in mind. And we're brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting. From the earliest odds to live in-game betting, BetOnline provides you with all the action and the ability to watch the games as they happen, with the largest selection of odds on everything: football, NBA, college basketball, NHL, UFC, everything you can think of, you name it. Head to BetOnline today, and don't forget to use our promo code BELIEVE, BLEAV, for a welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, the game starts here. Okay, so let's just let's kind of get into it here. What would we get for each of the Wizards for the holidays this year? Let's just start with Belisle, I guess. I would give Mr. Coulibaly Gilbert Arenas' lack of a conscience. Remember when Kobe Bryant said that, Gil had no conscience, and Gil went out and screamed no conscience every time he chucked like a 35-foot three in Kobe's face? That's what I'd like to see from Belisle a little bit. I'm not saying be a total game breaker, but just some small percentage of that for like a little bit. Just embody that like Agent Zero mentality here for a little bit. Honestly, Jordan Poole's kind of got it, like steal a little bit of Jordan's swagger just for a couple games. Like when he gets the green light and Belisle's doing his thing, like it's fun to watch. And you start to see like, hey, the tools are there, for him to make a jump. It's just really clearly like a mindset thing. And he just doesn't seem to have that from night to night. On the season, he's averaging 13 points, about 6 rebounds, about 3.5 assists, shooting 44% from the field, 30% from three, and 79% from the free throw line. So like, okay, 3-point shooting, you'd like to be a little better. But over the last couple games here, he's been starting to have a little bit more of that swagger that we were talking about. In the Memphis game, they got routed, but he had 17 points on 6 of 13 shooting. Each of the last 5 games, he's had 13 plus shot attempts. And that's really, I think, what I'm getting at here from him is that's what we want to see. In the Cleveland game, where they were relatively competitive, he had 27 points. He was 10 of 18 from the field, 6 rebounds, 5 assists, 2 blocks. Like he was kind of everywhere, which I thought was great. And even the turnovers have been high. You can live with that. And, in the last 5 games, he had 5 turnovers, 1 turnover, 4 turnovers, 3 turnovers, 1 turnover. Not great, but you can live with that because it means he's doing stuff and trying to make plays. In the Boston game in the middle of December, he had 20 shot attempts. He was 8 of 20, so not quite as efficient, but I still love the amount of attempts. He finished with 19 points, 5 rebounds, 6 assists, 1 steal. The next game after they get a win against Charlotte, he had 14 points on 5 of 13 shooting, his worst shooting performance of the group. But again, I love the amount of attempts. 7 rebounds, 5 assists, 2 steals, 1 block. And then in the most recent game against Milwaukee, he was 7 of 14, had 12 rebounds. It's his first ever double-double. And then also had 5 assists, 3 steals, 1 block, finished with 20 points. So that's more what I want to see from him. And I think what Wizards fans want to see, and honestly, what the Wizards should want to see for the rest of the year. Just give him the full, force feed treatment, and we'll see where he's at. He didn't play in the Oklahoma City game due to a groin issue, which is fine. Let him kind of rest up for a couple days here and get back out there and just force feed him minutes and reps. And I think that'd be great. For Jordan Poole, I would get him a shake weight and some protein powder for his Christmas gift, because he just has to get stronger. Like Jordan's been really good. This is honestly the one I struggled with the most. He's been playing really well, and the defense has been better. Like he's still not great on that end, but he is putting in more effort. He's getting his hands on a lot of balls, which means he has some good instincts there. Jump passing lanes and things like that. But I would just like to see him get a little stronger. Like you'll see him just sort of get moved off his spots a lot. And I think offensively, some of the best scorers in the league, they're not doing it with like incredible speed and quickness and athleticism. It's actually strength based. Like you look at the Kawhis when he's healthy, James Harden, Luka Doncic, like not that Jordan has the frame to do that, but just if he were a little stronger for the guys guarding him and could kind of get to his spot and hold his spot, I think that'd make him an even more efficient scorer. And I think it would help him finish around the basket a little bit better as well. And honestly, he'd hold up better defensively over the course of the game here too. So, we want to see him continue to play the way he's playing, and being stronger would also kind of help him continue to stay durable too. Bub Carrington, some on-ball reps. I jumped on with the No Ceilings guys. Tyler Metcalf was nice enough to have me on to talk about Bub Carrington, and just kind of the theme of that podcast was he has been like markedly better when he gets on-ball reps. He is not doing particularly well right now as an off-ball guy, and I think that's just not understanding the role and where he is. And it's not that he can't do it. We saw him do it a decent amount in Pittsburgh, but I think for him, just finding ways to carve out, opportunities for him to be the creator. There's been some situations where he's even out there with Brogdon and they still have him off ball and Brogdon kind of bring the ball up. And I'd like to see them flip flop that a little bit more. And just, if that's what you envision Bub as long term, as a guard, like an offensive initiator or the point guard combo, whatever you call him, I'd just like to see more of that now. Kyle Kuzma, I would get him a one-way ticket to Sacramento, just kind of over that experiment. And that seems like a team that could actually use him, especially if they're looking to move on from DeMar DeRozan. So if they can get anything out of it at this point, it just, they've clearly waited too long. And maybe they at this point, they say, hey, we'll just save it until some team gets desperate. And I don't know, but with the reporting coming out, it sounds a lot like, hey, both sides here are just ready for a split. And honestly, who can really blame him? It's clearly not worked when he's been on court so far this year. And that's really unfortunate and tough to see, but there's just not a lot of opportunities for this team to get assets back for any of these veteran guys. So it would be nice if they got just really anything for him at this point. If you get like even a highly protected first round pick and a young guy and don't have to take back like mountains of bad salary in the process, I just say you pull the trigger and you just take what you can get. And it's really unfortunate that that's the case, but Sacramento might be that team that's just like, hey, we got to make a move here. And this is a guy that presumably, fills a position of need and maybe fits a little bit better what we're looking for. And maybe that's just enough to like solicit some kind of value back from him. So we'll see. For Alex Sarr, I think I would get him a scholarship to the Hakeem Olajuwon big man camp. That seems to always help, bigs with their footwork and their moves around the basket. And he's just so paint adverse right now. Like it just, it's still kind of wild to me that at no point does he seem wanting to be around the rim. And he's been a little better about that, I think, actually, or maybe that's just me seeing what I want to see out on the court. But I feel like he's not drifting quite as much out to the 3-point line. And similar to what I said, with Jordan Poole, like I think that will get better with some strength as well. So for the season, Sarr's averaging 11 points, 6.5 rebounds, 2 assists, but he's shooting under 40% from the field, under 30% from three, and about 63% from the free throw line. I mentioned the big man school scholarship here, but I think touch would be good too. Like I just don't see much touch from him in general. Like he looks sort of heavy handed, and it's kind of tough to ever like turn him into much of a shooter in my opinion, but I'd love to be wrong. And maybe there's something they know that I don't, that you can use to develop that with a player, but it's one of those things you kind of usually have or you don't. His hands haven't been too great so far this season. I don't think, which worries me a little bit as well, but getting around the rim and being in the dunker spot and things like that and just getting him some easy looks, I think would, just sort of help him. But yeah, the strength thing applies here too. There's a lot I'd get for Alex Sarr. Unfortunately, in his last 5 games, he's taken 8 total free throw attempts, and 8 of them came against Charlotte, where he went 4 of 8 from the line. Like when you're 7 feet tall, you just can't have these kind of games where you're taking 6 or 7 more 3-point attempts than you are free throw attempts, on average. It's just kind of wild. So Let's go through the last 5 with him. When they played Dallas, he had 11 points, 8 rebounds, 2 block shots, 1 steal. Pretty good. 5 of 10 from the field. The next game, he was 6 of 10 from the field against Cleveland, finished with 14 points, 7 rebounds, 2 assists, 1 steal, 1 block. The next game against Boston, 14 points, 6 rebounds, 1 assist, 2 blocks. He was 6 of 18 that game, but aggressive. I think I'd like to see him take a few more of those around the rim than he did in that particular game. And then a couple nights ago in their win against Charlotte, I thought he was really good. Honestly, he had 19 points on 6 of 13 shooting. It was 3 of 6 from 3. He missed those free throws I talked about, but he did get them, and he sort of forced the issue there a little bit, which I thought was great. He had 9 rebounds, 5 assists. I think the short roll passing potential with him is really intriguing. That could be a bright spot to his game. And he had 3 block shots, which, you can't complain about. The one thing I will say, and this came to light, I think more in this most recent game against Milwaukee, he finished 4 of 7 from the field, had 11 points, 5 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 steals. It's just defensively, I think just discipline would go a long way for Sar. There's a lot of well, I don't have to get good position early. Like defending other bigs, you've got to do your work early against a player like that. And I think for him, for probably most of his basketball life, he didn't have to do those things because his length and mobility and athleticism allowed him to recover and just block every shot. And he is blocking a lot of shots, as I mentioned, but it's just not going to work on a regular basis against high level, NBA post players. Like you've got to just be preventative more than anything instead of so reactionary. And it's great if you can have the tools to react and still get a block and things like that. And he'll have a few spectacular ones, but it also leads to him just getting beat around the rim a lot more than a player, with his tools probably should, in my personal opinion. So a couple of different things. There's going to be a lot under Alex Sar's tree from our standing here, I believe, in Wizards. For Corey Kispert, next up, I would get him a razor to shave off that stupid mustache because he has been largely terrible while wearing it. And I don't know, maybe if he was more aerodynamic, he could actually guard somebody. Sorry, that one's a little mean, I know, but I've been relatively higher on Corey than a lot of folks. I think I think there's more there. He has decent agility and things like that. He should be able to guard people. If you're, attacking closeouts and getting to the rim, you should be able to translate some of that on the other end of the court, and it just doesn't happen enough. So, Monumental's been hyping up his rim, rim attacking and things like that. It's nice to do other things, but his main value is shooting a lot of threes and making a lot of threes. And you see it. I'm not the biggest believer in plus minus in general, but there are definitely certain nights where it's obvious with him where if he's not getting up a lot of attempts, they get killed in a lot of his minutes. And it's just, that's not going to get it done. He's shooting just under 6 threes per game and shooting 33%. He's a better shooter than that. He's a career 38% shooter. I think he should actually be better than that. As a sophomore, had his best shooting year. He took, about the same amount of attempts and made 42% of them. Last year, he took 38%. This year, it's just, I don't know if it's the lack of a pure point guard, like a Tyus Jones, setting him up to get some of those looks. I'm not sure what the case is, but we need him to have a hot month because him shooting 42% from the field overall is just, it's not going to provide a lot of value unless he starts to do some of these other things. He is rebounding a little better this year. He's up to 3.5, but 1.5 assists per game. All these other things are kind of pedestrian numbers for him. So you just you got to at least defend to justify getting him minutes on the court here. And his minutes are slightly up from last year, but down from 2 years ago. So it just you gave him this money. You presumably want him to be here for at least the next several years, or at least be a tradable asset for you. And I don't know how many people are trading for a shooting specialist that shoots 33% from the field. So we'll see, especially playoff teams, because they know that they can't put those kinds of players that are one-sided out on the court too often. And then I think he can do more. I'm all kind of tough on the guys I actually think can actually do more. And I think Corey can. The next one up here is Keyshawn George. I would get him just literally a week-long stint with the shooting coach that helped Denny Avdia last year. Denny finished last season at about 37.5%. He's about 36% this year after a really cold start. So he's been pretty good of late. And I think whatever that guy does, it seems to work, and for Denny, all the time he spent with Wizard shooting coaches really didn't do much for him, and he just said, like, "Let me go out and get my own guy," and it's made a clear difference. I would want that for Keyshawn as well. Like, we've heard about the Johnny Davis saga with not really trusting the Wizards coaching staff, and then you hear Brian Keefe say, "We don't have a designated shooting coach because we can all coach shooting." I've mentioned that on the pod before. I hate that. Like, they have a couple guys on their staff that were okay shooters, himself included. I think he was a 37% shooter in college, but none of these guys are elite enough that I think that they can be like the designated fix your shot guy. And that's really a common theme of each of these young players is they need work. And Keyshawn was honestly the one I thought would need the least work, but I think he's been good in other facets of the game. So if they can clean up the shooting, it's honestly like the same Denny paradigm where like he can drive and create and do these other things, but no one is taking the shot seriously enough right now that they're gonna like, get up on him at all. So if they're sagging off of you, it just makes it that much harder to do those other things. So for the year right now, he's shooting 34% from the field, which is putrid, 25% from three. He's not really getting to the line a whole lot, but he is in the mid 70s there, which is fine. But 7.5 points, 4 rebounds, 2.5 assists, one turnover, um, point 0.7 steal, point 0.7 blocks. Like he just does a little bit of everything. But you just need more from him. He was actually probably pretty good in this Oklahoma City game, I would say the other night. 11 points, 3 rebounds, 1 assist, 2 steals, 1 block. The 3 turnovers weren't great, but again, I can live with that from a young player right now. So yeah, we got to clean up the shooting, and I think that unlocks a lot of other stuff there because I think he's got the instincts and feel for the game to do more. So we'll see. Next up, Justin Champagnie, just a permanent roster spot. Like I think he's the kind of guy that makes this a valuable destination for other up and coming free agents. Like the Wizards are an organization that will give a young guy, a shot to get into the rotation and get minutes, and you can come here and play above your pay grade. So maybe they can actually get a few of these guys, on a team friendly deal. Like the Wizards are so used to overpaying for people, but some of these young guys with untapped upside might want to come here because they see opportunity. And the Wizards just look, if they're willing to give these guys those opportunities and you can come here and ball out, then maybe next year when you're due for that contract, like you can start to put that to better use. So I've really liked what Champagnie's done for them. For the season, he's averaging 9.5 points, 6.5 rebounds, 1.3 steals. Not shooting great, but he's doing enough. He's actually kind of stunk really in the last 2 games. Unfortunately, he was not good in the OKC game. Didn't really play a ton against Milwaukee and wasn't really that effective. But the 3 games before that, let's just go back to 5 games ago against Cleveland. He had 16 points, 8 rebounds, 1 assist, 1 steal, 1 block. And then you look at the Boston game, he had 13 points, 14 rebounds, 3 assists, 3 steals, 2 blocks. Like he was terrific and meaningful in both those games. And then in the win against Charlie's 5 of 7 from the field, got to the line a couple times. I'd like to see him do a little bit more of that. 8 rebounds again. Like the rebounding has been really important, and I need that from some of these other guys. 2 assists. Didn't really do anything on the defensive end from a stocks perspective, but I think he's been pretty active defensively. So like I've been very happy with Champagnie. He's been bounced around the league here for about 4 years, so just kind of cool to see him like carve out a little niche for himself, and I'd like to see him stick around. Malcolm Brogdon, I would get him some bubble wrap so he can stay healthy enough to actually make it to the trade deadline and be a positive asset. It sounds like from all reporting that teams are actually interested in acquiring his services, and he needs to be healthy to do that and be attractive to these teams and show them like he can stay on the court. And if there's just even a few more little like aches and pains along the way here, somebody might get gun shy about investing anything of particular value for him. And if you're the Wizards, you've got to decide. Like I think he's fine next to these other young guys. He doesn't really like steal their shine too much or anything like that. So it's really a matter of like, do you get enough for him to offset any of just like the solidness he probably provides for you? And that's the question they're going to have to ask. If it's 2 top 45 protected second round picks, like maybe it's just better to keep him at that point and kind of ride the year out. So we'll see. Just circling back here, I just saw this in the chat. Alexander Wilson said the thing about Keyshawn is that he shot 40% on three from three in college on 130 attempts. That's a relatively low sample size. I mean, he didn't really do much else other than shoot some wide open catch and shoot threes. And I agree with you. Like, I didn't think this would be an issue. I think honestly, this is like sort of that rookie snowball thing where it just the confidence got rattled early when he didn't make a lot, and it just sort of continued to snowball from there. And I think with just an offseason of some fine tuning and speeding up the mechanics and things like that, that once he gets a little tight and more confident on whatever they're trying to do with him form wise, I've seen some like no dip stuff that they're trying to do with him, and once that maybe takes hold, maybe he'll feel better about it. That's really the hope. If you're the Wizards, is that he can kind of just have an off season to start over and retool some things and just come in with a clean slate next year. Jonas Valanciunas, I would give him just an all access pass to either Disney World or Disneyland, whether it's the Lakers that want him or maybe the Orlando Magic. I saw they're looking for a veteran center now that Mo Wagner has gone down. But shout out Mo, former guest on the pod, friend of the pod here, was having a great year. Honestly, it was probably like the best sixth man, big man in the NBA. And that was after a lot of Wizards fans particularly wrote him off. So shout out to Mo for turning himself into a real player there. And, like the Jonas Valanciunas sort of workman-like mentality, I could see, fitting in with the Orlando Magic. So maybe they're a team that would be interested in that. And they've got some young, interesting pieces on that roster. So maybe that we could kind of, figure something out that works for both sides here. I think that would be interesting. Next up is Jared Butler. For Jared, just minutes. I feel like every time Jared Butler plays like a decent amount, I'm like, yeah, like he was good. And then he'll just go back to like sort of just disappearing, from the lineup again for a couple nights. And I just sort of just find myself like palms up, like, well, okay. In the Denver game, like I thought he was really impactful in that win. He was 5 of 9 from the field, 2 of 4 from three, had 2 rebounds, 4 assists, 2 turnovers, but just solid. And then again, they get ran out of the gym against Memphis, and he didn't shoot as well. He was 6 of 14, but had 5 rebounds, 7 assists, 3 turnovers. I would like to see him do a little bit more from the stock perspective. He's not going to block a lot of shots, so maybe get a few more steals. He was an active defender with good hands, but he's solid on that end. Like I don't feel like he just gets continually like exposed, which is nice. So hasn't played as much the last couple games. Only got 8 minutes in the game against OKC the other night, so it's not as great. But just him in the 15+ minute range, I think is what I'd like to see overall for him for the rest of the season. For the year, he's played in 20 games. He's averaging about 11 minutes per game. Getting that up into that 15, 16, 17 mark, especially after they trade some of these other guys out of here, I'd feel much better about. My guy, OBJ, holiday gift for the fans, the number 1 pick. Absolutely, my friend. We deserve that. That shouldn't even be a gift at that point. That should just be something the universe owes us for a lifetime of being Wizards fans, honestly. So fingers crossed for that. Keeping this one rolling. Johnny Davis, man, just a fresh start, just new scenery. Like I think that would be best for him at this point. Like just nothing but bad memories here in DC, and maybe just going somewhere else and just, a new perspective from a new coaching staff or somebody like who are the best, developmental guys in the league. Like somebody's got to be able to turn him into something, or at least give him a chance to try. At the very least, if you can't get him somewhere else, just get him some confidence somehow. Like he had one good G League game and they brought him back up to the Wizards, and I thought he played well, and then went back to not playing. So just hard to like build reps and confidence for yourself if you just don't get consistent opportunities. And it's fine if they've given up, but if they have, like just move on, make him, salary filler in a trade here at the deadline, and keep it moving if you have to. Next up, Marvin Bagley. Just, I don't know, man. I feel bad for this guy. Like he just cannot stay healthy. And I thought he'd given them a couple good minutes here and there over the last handful of games, and maybe just like a yoga mat or something, or like Pilates subscription or something. I remember Kristaps Porzingis talking about like getting into Pilates and yoga and things like that were really good for his career after having a bunch of different injuries. Obviously, this one the other night, he really can't help. Like someone, basically tripped into his leg and took his knee out. And I've not seen any reporting from the team yet on how serious that is. So fingers crossed for him. It just looked worse than it was, but it did not look good. And I don't know, maybe just some increased flexibility would help him be a little more durable. I don't know, but just um, sending good vibes your way, Marvin, because would have liked to see more of him the second half of the year, especially if Valanciunas moved on. What they could kind of do with him. So hopefully nothing too bad. Anthony Gill, I would get him the coaching staff starter pack, the official coaching staff polo, the whistle, the clipboard, all those things, and help him get prepared for moving over to a bench role next season. How many vets on this team do we need at this point? Like they keep hanging on to these vets for way too long, so it's not like you need to keep Gill as the only vet. I know I sound like a broken record on that. I appreciate that he's there. It doesn't have to be him necessarily, but you also just, to me, don't need 50% of your roster to be old guys. Like I just kind of don't get that balance personally. Rashawn Holmes, maybe just like a scarf and some mittens for sitting on the bench. If you're in an NBA arena, just on the end of the bench, they're not playing much. You get a little cold sometimes. So maybe we can help our guy out a little bit. Patrick Baldwin Jr. Yeah, man, I don't know. It's just not much there. A jump shot would be good. Like if presumably if you're going to be a stretch forward, you should probably actually stretch. And you just haven't seen him make much at any level except maybe high school, and that's been a long time at this point. So same thing with Johnny, just some confidence, and again maybe a fresh start somewhere would be interesting. Tristan Vukcevic, a new agent. Dude's getting fleeced right now. I don't understand this like weird secret knee bruise injury that's kept him out. I'm not really sure what's going on there. They seem to like him in those 7 games last year, but then ends up on a two-way and now doesn't play at all. Something fishy's going on there. So, I just hopefully something different for him in the new year here too, especially if some of these big men move on and maybe Bagley misses some time that carves out just a few minutes for Vukcevic, once he gets his sea legs under him. That's it. I think that's everybody on the team. Brian Keefe, just add you a shooting specialist or shooting coach to your staff there would be great. I don't know. But otherwise, just keep developing the young guys and doing what you're doing. From OBJ, I'm a Harper guy, but I wonder what the front office plans are with Poole. Poole Flagg isn't too bad. I just don't think they care. Like Jordan Poole has been better, but he's not been good enough that you can base anything you do in the top 5 of this draft on what he's done so far. If Harper is your guy, then maybe you do move on from Poole at some point. And I think he's been playing well enough that you can convince a team, especially next season. There's not that much left on the contract at that point. It's a little easier pill to swallow. And you've seen him be productive enough. Like, again, even if I'm a team like Sacramento, like it hasn't worked especially well with a guy like DeMar DeRozan because he doesn't stretch the floor for you. But Poole has been on a heater from 3. And if you need some spacing, or somebody like Milwaukee, like could they use a guy like that to come in and just like cook, even if it was off the bench for them? Like there are some interesting spots I think you could consider. Maybe back to Golden State. I don't know. We'll see. Just there's some things you could do there with him. So you take whoever the best guy is and you just roll with it. Like they're going to have a definitive, here's the top guy on our board. And that's what you take. And no one else on this roster should dissuade you from that. Like I love Bilal about as much as I liked any draft pick in a long time. And he's just not been good enough that you say, like, I can't take a small forward because Koulibaly's here. And I think the other nice thing is about a lot of these other guys they've drafted, there is some positional versatility there. Like you could play, you could take another wing and put that person and Koulibaly together, or another forward and put, Keyshawn and that forward together. So that's great. And I think a lot of these guys, in the top 5-ish of this draft are also guys that can do a little bit, of everything. So you can kind of mix and match them, which I think is a nice thing about why they're drafting. Like even Bub, you could play him some at the 2 and things like that if you needed to, or at least he can guard some 2s in the NBA. And worst case, he's just a backup guard for you, and you don't need him to be as versatile. But Harper is big enough to guard, 2s and maybe even some 3s in certain situations, especially when teams go small down the stretch of games. Flagg can probably guard 3s and 4s and maybe even some 2s and some 5s, depending on the situation. Bailey, I haven't loved the defense overall, but I think with the tools he has, you expect that he's somebody that could give people fits across multiple positions. And Igor Demon, he's a guy that's at 6'8" or whatever he's listed at right now. Like, he's a big creator, but defensively you can put him in, a bunch of different spots as well. So, um, uh, yeah, I think that's the biggest thing for them. Kasparis Jakavicius, or however Jakavicius, apparently it's a Jack sound at the beginning now for Illinois. Like, and he's 6'5". I mean, so he's got some size. So I think that's great for them. Gives them some flexibility. Just staying with Flag though for a minute. I did get to go see their game in person against George Mason. So one, if you ever get the opportunity to go to Cameron Indoor Stadium, it's incredible. And I hate this as a Maryland fan saying it, but it was like an iconic building and just like an unforgettable experience. And I was literally in the first row. So I got to watch Flag warm up, and he was stroking jumpers in warm up, which was cool to see. And it looked more fluid. And then once the game started, dude was getting to the rim at will and just missing bunnies. And I wonder if, like, sometimes some little tiny stuff in shooting mechanics can make a big difference. Like, if like you keep your outside fingers on the ball a little bit too long, sometimes you get some weird spin. And like somebody like Flag, the ball hits every part of the rim and rolls around and comes out more than just about any player I've ever seen. So there's a lot of those where he just like will get to the rim, put up this like little like floater scoop kind of thing, and they just somehow rim out, which it seems impossible. And a few of them, it's just like, whoa, okay, didn't really make a lot of sense. So we'll see how that progresses over the course of the years. Not shooting it as well as you would like, but the dude gets downhill and he gets to the rim, and you're starting to see a lot more versatility. Early in the year, it was a lot of like ISO for him, and he would go and do that right to left spin move, and that was like his go-to move in high school, and teams know that now. But he's a nightmare to keep out of the paint, and he makes smart plays. He gets plays off 2 feet and will create for other guys. So I think even if Flag himself isn't like the most efficient offensive player, I think he's a guy that your team offense will be better while he's on the court, and I think that's sort of an underrated aspect of what he's going to bring to the table. But he needs to shoot better. I mean, that's just what it is. He started off that particular game by stroking 2 deep threes, and it was like, oh yeah, baby, like this is on right now. And then just everybody on the court cooled off. It turned into an absolute rock fight for the rest of the first half, and then ultimately Duke pulled away from George Mason, who is a very good defensive team. So they were making life tough for Flag throughout, but the guy stuffs the stat sheet. Like, it's really just nice to see. He plays 30 minutes a game. He's only shooting 42% from the field on 14 attempts, 25% from three, which is just not good enough for him long term. I think he's got decent touch though. Like, he looks okay from the free throw line. He's a 75% free throw shooter, so not bad there. Total rebounds per game, 8.5. Like, that's great. In that particular George Mason game, I think he had 5 offensive rebounds himself in the first like 10 minutes of the game. The dude is relentless. And I think that's another thing that will help people's offenses as well. Like, granted, people don't offensive rebound, the same way in the NBA, but like, this is kind of different. It's not like someone crashing the glass from the far side. It's him like following up his own shot and relentlessly attacking the rim with it, which is great. And then I mentioned the 3.5 assists per game. And I think this is where he would be a particularly interesting fit with this Wizards team. Like, I think each of the guys they've drafted, like, one of the sneaky underrated elements of each of their game is the ability to move the ball and sort of be unselfish. Like, Sar's been a good creator for others. Like, Koulibaly has some, creation skills that I think as the handle tightens up, we'll see even more of. Like, Bub can obviously create for people. Keyshawn wants to be an unselfish player, especially it seems like when he's playing with the other young guys, he's even more willing to give the ball up. So I think Flag will fit in nicely from that perspective. He's averaging 1.5 steals and 1.3 blocks. Turnovers, 2.3. I'm not mad at that as much as he has the ball. So he's been really good on ball, especially I think offensively. Like, their offense is better when he's involved in the game. You got to figure out what you do with him off ball, even if it's just as simple as putting someone like him in the dunker spot. I think would be really interesting. And I heard Rick Barnes, the Tennessee coach, make this point the other day, and some he stole from Bobby Knight apparently. But you got asked like what you do if you have a player that teams don't have to respect their jump shot. And that's the Bobby Knight quote, was when you put him somewhere on the floor that they do have to respect his jump shot or respect his shooting. And if that's right around the rim, so be it. But that is still an area of the floor that teams have to guard. So imagine Flagg is like a small ball big, even operating out of the dunker. Like, it's interesting. He can go up and get lobs and all these other things, and he's versatile enough. He could be the roll man in a pick and roll or the initiator and some like inverted stuff. So I think the versatility he offers for you makes him like a really safe pick. I do personally think someone like a Harper might have the higher ceiling at this point, realistically, just because he is so dynamic offensively. He can be like a single-handed offensive engine, but I wouldn't be mad at either player ending up in a Wizards uniform long term. The other guys in that game that I thought were interesting and just want to talk about for a minute too. Khaman Maluach, the 7'2" player for them. Like, there are guys that are 6'10" and play like they're 7'2", and then there are guys that are actually 7'2" and play like they're 7'8". And that's how I felt about Maluach. Like, he wasn't particularly great in that Mason game overall, but John Shire even said it in the post game. Like, he's a guy that, he's really going to be one of those players that he can score like 5 points in a game and ultimately still be the most impactful player on the floor. And right now for Duke, he's averaging 8.4 points per game, 5 rebounds. He's shooting 79% from the field, which is crazy. And he's actually got decent touch. He shoots 80% from the free throw line. Like, I think he will absolutely shoot it at some point in his career. He's only averaging 0.3 3-point attempts per game, and he's making a third of them. So, I mean, that's almost like, it's literally 1 of 3 for the season. So it's not a part of his game right now, but he's averaging 1 block, and I think that number is a little misleading. It's not that he's not blocking shots. He's just a total deterrent from a Duke team that is the best defensive team, in the country right now. And it helps that Malik Brown is as good a defensive backup as you could probably hope to find. But Maluach is a guy that, like, players drive and see him and immediately sort of U-turn and reset. And I think that says a lot for him. He's only averaging 18 points a game. He does foul, a little too much right now. Again, like 2 fouls per game isn't crazy, but he's not playing that much. So, per 40 minutes, it's about 4 fouls a game. So when they need him to play a lot of minutes in a big game, it's something he's just going to have to be mindful of. But the raw talent there, Maluach is absolutely somebody I would have in my personal top 10, just because, for me, I would never take a center, top 5-ish unless I thought he were generational. But somewhere around 10 in a draft like this, hey, if I end up with another pick, he's intriguing to me. And this is going to be one of those ones where it's really going to come down to your individual philosophy here. Who are the centers you're willing to take early in this particular draft? Like, Wizards fans, I think, recently have just really fallen in love with Maryland freshman center Derik Queen, and obviously as a Terp, I've loved everything he's brought to the table as well. But it's just really going to be a question about how what he does translates at the NBA level. Like, having been close to both guys now, like, Queen is probably 5 or 6 inches shorter than someone like Maluach, who was like a genuine, like, let's say they list him at 7'2". He's at least 7'1". I'll tell you that with confidence. Whereas Queen is about 6'9", and he looks better and more mobile. And I thought he's defended well on the perimeter, but he's still probably a 6'9" drop big for most of his time in the NBA. He doesn't really block a lot of shots. So that's really a question. He can't shoot it right now. I know people like to watch highlights and saw that 2 threes he made against the Purdue game, but he has way more airballed threes this year than he has like shots that he've even missed and hit the rim. So that's not great. He's shooting 12% from 3 on about 1.5 attempts per game. Like, that's just not a portion of his game right now. All that to say, he's got great touch. Shoots 78% from the free throw line. Like, I think Queen will shoot it at some point. So the fact that he can be a stretch big, I think, helps offset that a little bit. But just from an NBA perspective, rarely do you see a player that doesn't at least protect the rim or immediately stretch the floor go particularly high in a game. And the things Queen does well, he's got like, Hoover vacuums for hands. The guy catches everything. It makes him a great rebounder. He's averaging 8.3 a game right now, which is awesome. Really underrated passer, 2.3 a game. He doesn't get to do that as much at Maryland as I think he would probably get to do on an NBA floor. So you'd see more of that. He's averaging 1.1 blocks, 1.3 steals. I think the steals have been better and more impressive than I would have expected. He's got quick, smart hands. So you can tell he has like a good feel for the game and good, basketball IQ, which is nice. It's just, he's a weird fit. Like the Şengün comp was the one I used early, but he does like a little more finessey stuff even, and he's kind of burstier with some of the moves he makes around the rim. Maybe not quite the creator that Şengün is yet, but could be. So it's just gonna have to like if he continues to kind of shake off some of the baby fat that he had coming into the year, does he get more dynamic? Does he get more explosive? Can he make enough threes that maybe you could put him, as a power forward essentially? The problem right now is like him and Sar, neither of them can shoot, and it's really tough to have two players that, Queen's not really a rim protector and Sar's not really much of a rebounder. Like it just like in theory, if both of them stretch the floor a little bit, it'd be a really unique combo, and I could see that lineup working, but just hard to play two guys that don't shoot at all together in the NBA front court right now. So I'd be a little leery of that, particular fit at the moment. But hey, we'll see how it goes. Shout out Riley. Merry Christmas to you, too, buddy. And OBJ, you don't smell, man. So don't listen to Riley. All right. So last one here from the Duke game. Again, I was actually more impressed, like relative to expectations, in that particular game, by Kon Knueppel than anybody else on the floor. Like Flagg was what I thought he would. He was who I thought he was, I guess. And then Maluach is just, he's like Clint Capella on steroids. But Knueppel, like every bit of like 6'6", solidly built, puts the ball on the floor a lot better, than I think he gets credit for. He was just really good in their most recent game against Georgia Tech. He struggled against George Mason, and they have the right kind of guys to guard him and make life tough on him. He's 3 of 7. He just didn't really do a lot. 0-4 from 3. He had good looks. His shot looks good. He's the dude that when you see him shoot it, every time he shoots it, you expect it to go in. He's not shooting really that well for the year. He's at 34%. I bet he gets up to around 37 by the end of the year here. Like I think some of these will start to fall. He's a 95% free throw shooter right now, but does not get to the line a whole lot less than 2 attempts per game. But averaging, 3.6 rebounds, 3 assists, about a little less than a steal. No blocks. He's never going to be a shot blocker, but 12 points per game as a freshman on one of the best teams in the country. And I think Duke, will probably be one of the 5 best teams in the country, when it's all said and done. That Mason game, like I mentioned, I thought was a tough matchup for him because they have littler, tough defender guards who kind of got up in him. But what I talked about earlier with like Poole getting stronger, like you already see this with someone like Knueppel about just getting to his spots. There are certain guys that they're not the athletic guy, they're not the bursty guy, but they get wherever they want on the court and play with a certain pace. And he does that already. And he's a big dude, and you're not moving him off a spot, and he's shooting over people. And also kind of, again, gets in the lane, plays off 2 feet, creates for other people, like well coached already. So he's interesting. I've seen different boards have him in different places. So where he ultimately falls is going to be really interesting, especially when you compare him to someone like Liam McNeely, who's really heating up for Milwaukee. And yes, I did just make a white guy to white guy comp, but realistically, as like the small forward shooters, in this draft, in that sort of late lottery range, I think they're going to be, kind of interesting parallels. I thought Knueppel was bad in the game I saw defensively. He held up like okay from a not getting destroyed perspective, but he hand checks a lot right now, and you're not going to be able to do that in the NBA, especially coming in as a rookie. He's got kind of like that Denny Avdija build where I think he'll be strong enough to like hold his own against guys, but you're not going to be able to push back against offensive players. And he was doing that in a college game, and especially at Cameron, you're not going to get called for those kinds of like hand checking fouls and things like that. So, we'll see what he ultimately does. And again, another guy kind of playing his way into his frame and things like that. Maybe he gets a little quicker and more dynamic. And if he's just so good offensively long-term, maybe you can kind of, ignore all that. So we'll see ultimately what happens with Kon Knueppel, but he is more interesting after seeing him in person because he's the real deal size-wise. And a lot of this guy, we all know this pre-draft guys' heights magically grow over the course of the year. The Duke guys they appear to be the heights they're listed. I'm usually pretty good at judging that when I can be in a room with somebody or 5 feet away and just walking through the locker room, like those heights look legit. So, we'll see. The other guy locally I want to talk about real quick here just to end is Thomas Sorber. I mentioned the Derik Queen thing. Again, like at some point, I'm a big firm believer in, hey, this guy's so good at basketball, you take a shot on it. Again, I wouldn't probably do it inside the top 10 personally, but come lottery, I think that's an easier sell. Thomas Sorber is the guy though that like I would be interested to see how GMs look at this. Like, if you could get Sorber at 25, is that more appealing long term than someone like Queen at 12? And that's something you got to weigh for yourself. I don't think the Wizards will have the assets to get themselves back anywhere near lottery with the second pick, but could they get into the 20s? Sorber, I think, is the kind of guy that he's not really a pure five in the NBA, but could you close games with him as a five? I think so. Like, he's a legitimate, rim protecting guy, but similar to someone like Sar, he moves like really well laterally. And I think the ground coverage thing is going to be the most interesting thing about what like Sorber brings to the table here. And maybe ultimately he's going to be projected late first round pick and he just, decides to go back to school for another year. I don't know. But if I were him, I'd absolutely come out. As a freshman, he's averaging 15 points, 8 rebounds, 2.5 assists. Another guy that's kind of a sneaky good creator from people. He can't really shoot it from three right now, but again, the touch is pretty good. He's about a 74% free throw shooter, but he's averaging about 19% from three on 2 attempts per game. So that's not there yet. But 1.3 steals, 2 blocks. He had a game-saving steal or game-saving deflection the other night where he locked up a guy against Seton Hall at the end of the game. Just moves his feet really well against other guards too. Like, that versatile ground coverage center or big man or power forward, or however you want to label him, would be really intriguing to me personally. So those are just kind of some guys to keep an eye on, especially the local ones here. Can't go wrong. It's awesome to have guys like Queen and Sorber as freshmen here in the area that are just killing it for both teams. And, both teams exceeding expectations largely because of those guys. So just, that's awesome to watch. If you get an opportunity to go out and see either of them live in person, you won't regret it because they're just fun players. So that's really it. It's all I got for y'all. I appreciate everybody tuning in. Thanks for making, this another great year of Believe in Wizards. Honestly, like, viewership is a little bit down, and I think hopefully it's not because you guys are tired of us. It's just where the Wizards are at. There's not a ton to talk about, and that's okay. We'll try to make this fun. So for those of you who are still tuning in, thank you. Appreciate y'all. And if there's other things you want us to do or talk about to make things more interesting over the course of the season, we're always open to that. And, whatever you want to hear about from Jihadi, or if it's just old MJ stories and stuff, again, we can certainly dust some of those off too. So thank you all for what you do. Go Wizards. Happy holidays. Happy start to your new year here. And the drill, presented by betonline.ag. All right, we'll catch y'all next time.